Hey, welcome back everyone. We're again continuing our 5-day-a-week broadcast Monday through Friday on the coronavirus, the CCP virus. I'm again here broadcasting from my apartment in Queens, New York. We have exclusive leaked documents from the Chinese Communist Party saying the virus outbreak in Harbin has been, quote, out of control. There have been rumors going around that the email accounts of the Wuhan Virus Laboratory, the CDC, the Gates Foundation were breached, and there were leaked documents posted online. And the Chinese regime has also launched a new Report Your Neighbor app. I explain that and also go into some of the similar, unfortunately, issues we're seeing here in the United States. So stick around, we have a whole bunch more coming up. If you haven't already, please remember to like and subscribe. We need your support. If you're on YouTube, also click the notification bell. You'll get alerts when new videos are up. So first off, on this leaked document. So Epoch Times, of course, being, as I mentioned before, proudly blacklisted in China, because that's what happens when you tell the truth there. You know, of course, we're not able to get into the mainland. We do have offices in Hong Kong and in Taiwan. Whenever people want to get documents out, they typically come to us. When people want to, become whistleblowers, they typically come to us. And so we also get a lot of inside sources in China. We also have, make phone calls into China. And we have a new leaked document, and this is a notice. It's a 4-page warning letter from authorities in Heilongjiang Province, and they're accusing the local officials in Harbin for the growing outbreaks, saying that there are clusters of outbreaks and the cases have been increasing. It says the situation of the virus in this province right now is urgent, and it notes that one village in Harbin in particular that was reopened had a poor handling that caused the virus to spread further, resulting in, quote, an out-of-control state. And of course, it says the document is not to be published, and so that said, we have it here, all 4 pages for y'all. In the descriptions, I'll always include the sources of articles discussed. Now, you may have remembered we mentioned before there are new outbreaks taking place in China. The Chinese Communist Party has, of course, been saying that there are no new outbreaks, at least for a while. Then they were saying there are asymptomatic cases. Then they were saying there's risk of a second wave outbreak. And now, of course, they're locking down cities again. They're closing things down again after the initial opening up. And Heilongjiang Province is now getting hit a bit harder. Government agencies say they don't have enough money to give salaries to teachers. And they're also saying the virus has hit their finances so hard that they can't make payroll on time. And so, in other words, this virus, when it comes to economic downturn in China, is no longer just affecting businesses. It is affecting the Chinese Communist Party itself. It is affecting government finances, which is pretty interesting when we think about it, because this means that the economic impact now is having a rippling effect. It's not just on the business level and the normal social level. It's hitting the actual governance of the Chinese Communist Party at this point. And as we noted in a previous episode, Heilongjiang Province has new lockdowns. They had opened it back up and they're closing it down again because of the virus. The Chinese Communist Party has been talking now about the risk of a second wave outbreak. And even though, again, we've shown evidence that you can argue the virus never really went away in the first place, the Chinese Communist Party wanted to get people back to work, and it's using this whole asymptomatic cases and imported cases. In other words, they were encouraging a lot of Chinese to return to China, saying it's the safest place for the virus. People go back, they get put on lockdown, and of course the Chinese Communist Party has been blaming them for the new outbreaks of the virus. In Heilongjiang Province, they've reenacted some of the lockdowns, which could suggest a few things. Now, if we understand that the Chinese Communist Party knew the virus was spreading, we knew things were already pretty bad, and we knew that they reopened the country not because the virus had technically gone away, but because they wanted to get people back to work to try to save the Chinese Communist Party, from this economic downturn, basically. The fact that local governments now are locking down the cities, it's unclear whether this is a top-level directive or a local directive. Either way, it is interesting because the Chinese Communist Party is backpedaling on something that's going to make them look very bad on the international stage, and they don't do that casually. Now, moving on, we're going to talk about these rumors about Kim Jong-un allegedly being in critical condition. Now, I'm sure some of you saw the stories going around of all these rumors. Some said that he was brain dead, some said that he had unknown surgery, did not wake up from it. Some said he was in a weakened state. It is not clear whether this is the case, and it might be, it might not be. Actually, the information suggests it could be. Now, the rumors are unconfirmed. CNN apparently wrote the original story citing an anonymous U.S. official. Some media that also wrote about it have somewhat walked back on their initial reporting. South Korea has noted there's no unusual activity in North Korea right now, which you would expect if the supreme leader were to die or be in a comatose state, allegedly. You can argue either way on this. One is that very likely his sister would just take charge, so maybe it would be a smooth transition. At the same time, some people who watch the North Korean regime could assume that maybe there would be infighting on who would take over that seat, and so maybe there would be signs of unrest in the country if that were to happen, if he were to die, or be in a state where, it looks like he might die. Now, part of the speculation that something is up with him comes from the fact that on April 15th, which is the biggest holiday in the country, dedicated to his grandfather, the founder of the North Korean communist regime, he did not show up. And that is an anomaly. That's something that doesn't happen when you're dealing with a country that has, this cult of personality based around the leader of the Communist Party. Trump said in an April 21st press conference that the U.S. doesn't know Kim's status, and he said, quote, "I wish him well, because if he's in the kind of condition the reports say, that's a very serious condition." And now on to this rumored internet breach and leaked documents, leaked login credentials for email systems. Now, there were rumors circulating around the internet, a lot on Twitter, matter of fact, saying that the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the CDC, the NIH, and the Gates Foundation were hacked, that email logins were posted online and that documents were leaked online. Now, I looked into these claims and I have not been fully able to confirm them, but I will show you what I did find. Now, if you were to go to Pastebin, you will find that there are, in fact, new posts there that do have the login credentials, apparently, that look like email accounts and the passwords of, in fact, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the CDC, the NIH, and the Gates Foundation. Whether these are legitimate logins, I cannot confirm because, of course, trying them out could bring legal issues and arguably irresponsible journalistic practices, as tempting as it might be. We could also assume, too, that if these were posted online, that the individuals who did the breach and posted them did go through them. And of course, there have been reports that there were screenshots and documents posted as well. I did find some documents, only in Chinese though, and it's not clear whether documents from the other organizations were leaked. I did hear rumors about this, I could not find them. And of course, it's also unclear whether the documents I found are the ones tied to this directly or whether that's disinformation. Notably, I did double-check across several different sources. These do appear to be the ones that were posted at least by whoever hacked these accounts and posted them, but again, unclear. Now, just briefly, some of you maybe don't know what Pastebin is. Pastebin is basically like an open document system. People can log in, post just whatever they want, basically. You'll find a lot of hacker groups use Pastebin because it's somewhat anonymous, and so they can go in there and post credentials or post, say, doxes if they want to go after somebody, or leaks and things like that. And so it does yield some pretty interesting stuff sometimes. Now let's go over these documents that are allegedly leaked from the Chinese side of this. Now, of course, there aren't a ton of them that were made public, at least not the ones I found. But they are interesting. They don't seem to show anything too significant, to be honest. A lot of it is apparently online discussions, allegedly among maybe staff who worked at this Institute of Virology in Wuhan. It says, okay, first it starts off with a Weibo post saying Wuhan police on Weibo stating citizens spreading rumors about pneumonia were taken into custody. And this is on January 1st. So very early on, earlier on than a lot of us assumed this whole thing was going on for. Frankly, the fact that a Weibo post would be in here makes me wonder about the legitimacy, because I mean, unless maybe these organizations were storing it, but of course this would have been public domain information anyways. Weibo is kind of like a microblog platform in China. One of them says, government hasn't determined to release info to the public yet. Hospital personnel have identified it. It is a coronavirus, but they're under pressure and can't release anything until they're allowed. Allegedly, again, communications of individuals who worked at this laboratory. This isn't technically new. We do know that the Chinese Communist Party did silence doctors who tried warning people about the virus, the outbreak. Not clear whether this is legit again, but at the same time it doesn't say anything that we didn't know already, technically. And of course, another person is saying, I'm curious, what's the real mortality rate of this disease? It says we personally estimate to be over 10,000. Now, if there were 10,000 very early on, before the Chinese Communist Party even made this public, that would be pretty significant. Now, with this said, I'm not including all the screenshots here. I will include links to these in the Google, links to the archives of them at least, in the Google Doc, in the description, which again I include all the sources discussed on each program in there. This is possibly disinformation, and so I don't want to say it's absolutely accurate. Also, I can't verify whether the email logins are accurate. I do not. Of course, they have been leaked. They're public. We can assume that they've already been changed. And there's also rumors, there's all kinds of rumors. Some people say this might be a honeypot. Some people say that this might be a disinformation campaign of the Chinese Communist Party to make it appear that, to frame the nature of how this virus got out, to make it appear people involved, at least on the laboratory side, may not have known what was happening. In other words, it shows that they were, unaware of what was happening and were just hearing rumors, and they're discussing about these rumors. Maybe it is real. Who knows? And it's also unclear whether these documents that were posted, at least online, alongside these archives that show these login credentials, unclear whether these are actually connected. Some of the documents on there I have seen before. It's unclear whether they maybe the database at this Wuhan lab did have these documents and people were talking about them. Maybe the person who posted them felt it necessary to include them with it, or maybe, again, it's a disinformation campaign. With that said, if hackers did in fact breach these different organizations, and notably, I couldn't find any posts from the other ones, only the ones allegedly from the Chinese side. If these were breached, we could assume that the hackers did go through them. Allegedly, they claim that's what they did, and so we may be hearing more about this if it's real. And now moving on to this new Report Your Neighbor app. So Changsha City in Henan Province launched a new app that encourages anyone in the city to report illegal masks and other violations of the Chinese Communist Party's laws. In other words, if you see someone who is violating safety protocols or other laws, you can use this little handy-dandy iPhone app, or whatever type of phone they have, to report your neighbors, to report on them. And it's a gamified system. It gives people a score for reporting people, and higher scores will get you rewards from the Chinese Communist Party. So people have a financial incentive or other incentives to report on people for crimes. Older people in China are saying this reminds them of the Cultural Revolution. And of course, this was one of the more brutal times of the Chinese Communist Party. It took place not too long after they took power. And what they did essentially was went and destroyed all traditional Chinese culture. Now, China, of course, has a history of around 5,000 years. And, of course, many different dynasties and, just incredible art, incredible culture. People said, you couldn't dig a few feet in the ground without finding, some artifact, some cultural relic. And when the Chinese Communist Party took over, they destroyed all that. They destroyed the dance culture, they destroyed the art culture. If you believed in Confucius, you'd be shamed. If you were a Buddhist monk or a Taoist priest, you'd be, Taoist priests, they can't shave their beards or cut their hair. They'd be forced to do so and be forced to return to society. They took Buddhist monks and sent them to the front lines of the Korean War. And of course, we know about these wave attacks that the Chinese Communist Party was using in that war, where they were just using people as human shields, essentially, even clearing minefields using people. And so this was a brutal time of the Chinese Communist Party, and one where pretty much if you had traditional values, if you believed in Chinese traditional beliefs, you could be persecuted. If you believed in religion, you'd be said to believe in superstition, and you could be persecuted for it. Children were made to turn against their teachers, turn against their families. It was a campaign of mass struggle and a campaign of destroying the four olds, destroying the entire cultural heritage of the country. And of course, a big part of that was encouraging people to carry out these abuses on each other, to do anything on such a large scale that is required. And so older people right now in China are saying this feels like that, where people are being encouraged and given incentives to turn on each other. Now that said, I say it with great shame, but here in New York City we have possibly some similar issues, not as severe of course. But New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio is coming under fire for this. He announced a new social distancing tip line where people can report on people for not following social distancing requirements. And of course, Americans, my fellow Americans being unhappy about this, decided to fill the tip line with lewd imagery. Let's just put it that way. Going on this, Attorney General William Barr announced on April 21st that the Justice Department may support lawsuits against governors' orders that go too far. And this is an interesting development because there's a lot of concern in the United States right now that our freedoms are being taken away, that we no longer have constitutional rights. At the same time, based on what we're seeing in China, I do believe that this virus could be pretty severe. I believe it is questionable how effective quarantines are. At the same time, based on what we're seeing in China, and they've reopened things and it seems to have gotten worse, maybe they do help. It's hard to say, to be honest. At the same time, though, there's the risk of governments pushing too far. Now, in the United States, even if the federal government, say, gives back the powers, the extra powers it has been given to handle this virus, it's possible that state, local governments might retain some of these powers. And of course, this is one of the big concerns people have in all parts of the world, that we're seeing an expansion of government power. Will they relinquish it once this is over with? And in the meantime, to what extent do they push it? What is too much? Some people feel that line's already been crossed. And so it's interesting now that Barr is taking some actions against that, saying that governors could face lawsuits. The governors themselves could face lawsuits if they go too far from it. And the Justice Department may support individuals who do file those lawsuits. We have an update on this alleged infighting within the Chinese Communist Party's top levels. Now, you may remember in the last episode we talked about this Sun Li-jun, who is Vice Minister of the Ministry of Public Security, also the 610 office, and also one of the main people in charge of the Hong Kong security forces, notably during the Hong Kong protests, which are still going on to an extent. Now, in this latest incident, coming just after the previous one, Attorney General of the Chinese Communist Party, Fu Jianhua, has stepped down. Okay, two top-level officials. That is pretty interesting, especially back-to-back like this. And as I mentioned in the last episode, our Epoch Times sources are saying that this is actually tied to concerns or rumors within the Chinese Communist Party's top levels of attempted coups, that there may be infighting within the top levels of the Chinese Communist Party, which may be becoming more severe. Now, we do know, as I've mentioned, that there are two different rival factions within the Chinese Communist Party. There's the faction of Jiang Zemin, who was 2 leaders ago, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, Xi Jinping. His main ally was Zhu Yongkang, the former security czar in China, who has already been purged by Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping, of course, is the head of the Chinese Communist Party, but does not fully control the Chinese Communist Party. Jiang Zemin, even under Hu Jintao, still had most of the control over the country. Xi Jinping, meanwhile, launched his anti-corruption campaign where he went and purged a lot of people from the Jiang faction and did gain power over a lot of parts of the country. He still does not control everything, notably, and so it's a very confusing picture. Maybe one day I could get someone on and we could do an interview, kind of explain the whole thing. But this Fu Zhenghua, notably, had been believed previously to be part of the Jiang faction, and notably as well, Sun Lijun being one of the heads of the 610 office, the kind of Chinese Gestapo, it's an extrajudicial police force specifically created to persecute Falun Gong, which was a persecution Jiang Zemin himself personally launched. And so, of course, both individuals tied to the Jiang faction purged back to back, or I shouldn't say purged with Fu Zhenghua. He stepped down, and so it's unclear of whether he was made to step down or there's something more to it. Who knows at this point. That said, we'll keep you updated on these as they develop. Now, of course, folks, we're doing these broadcasts Monday through Friday, so please tune in. I'm going to be focusing heavily on this virus, the CCP virus. I'm going to start trying to do some interviews as well soon, finally have things set up well enough here where I think I could swing it, at least until I get back to the office. And of course, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. We do need your support. And if you are on YouTube, click the notification bell. You get alerts when our new videos are up, and as I mentioned, if you have already subscribed, please double check and make sure you're still subscribed. People are saying that they have been getting unsubscribed without their knowing. Now, with that said, folks, please take care of yourself, stay safe. I'll see you next time.